Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this series where I've been talking to people about the organisations they belong to and the incredible work that they do for animals in rescuing and caring for them and advocating for them in their community. And we'll be running a number of these over the next few months. So, my sixth interview today is with Katja from Mange Management. Mange Management is a volunteer-run organisation committed to treating and reducing the impact of mange in free-living wombats. Katja, welcome, and thanks so much for chatting with me today. How have you been going throughout what is undoubtedly very challenging times?
Thanks a lot for having me, Andy. We are going fairly well overall, but of course we haven't been able to do fully what we usually do with the restrictions we had.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, that you're doing okay, but yeah, it's a common answer that I'm getting from people is that that they haven't been as able to get out, or their volunteers able to get out as much as they'd like to do the work that they want.
Yeah.
And look, I think the mange management issue and the mange wombat issue is still something that is rather unknown to most people. I mean, most people would be well aware of the problems that have faced the Tasmanian devils, for instance, but mange in wombats is something that they're probably completely unaware of, the larger part of the community. Can you just explain to our listeners what mange actually is and why it has such a devastating impact on wombats?
Sure. Sarcoptic mange is a parasitic skin infestation of mange mites. It affects over 100 species worldwide. For example, bears in the US or foxes in the UK, but also livestock. Wombats are one of the hardest hit species, though, when it comes to mange. So what happens actually when a wombat gets infested with mange? The female mites, they burrow under the skin of the wombat, they lay eggs, and the wombats become very itchy. So over time then thick scabs form and they crack open and they become infected. And when the wombat is left untreated, they die a really slow and horrible death. It has actually wiped out some local wombat populations in some areas already. So it is a big issue for wombats.
It sounds terrible. And obviously it's also quite painful for them, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And they can't sleep because they got to itch all the time. And so it's very uncomfortable. I wouldn't say painful at first, but over time, when it's getting to the more advanced stage, it certainly is.
So the obvious question, I suppose, that the community will want to know is that where have these mites come from? Have they always been here in Australia, or have they come in on an invasive species, or have they adapted from livestock?
They most likely came in with the first settlers on humans as scabies, or potentially on dogs or foxes, but it hasn't always been around in Australia. So only about the last, say, 200 years, they have been around, and wombats are just not prepared to deal with that condition.
Is it progressing? Is it becoming a situation where we might potentially see not just localised populations of wombats, but statewide or even Australia-wide? If we don't do something fast, we could wipe them out.
Oh, definitely. That's our big concern. Wombats do face quite a lot of threats between the mange, roadkill, illegal and legal culling, and the loss of habitat. So overall, I think if nothing's being done about the mange, they could become endangered in the next 30 years.
And we have a terrible record as a state about on species extinction. We're one of the worst.
Yeah, and it's an Australia-wide problem. So especially in Tasmania, for example, it has wiped out a whole population at Narantapoo National Park, where there used to be 250 wombats about 10 years ago, and now there's less than 5 left.
Awful, absolutely terrible. Look, you and the rest of the team at Mange Management have done such an incredible job in the fight against mange. Can you tell us what you're currently doing and what you see as the priorities and the next steps over the next few years? Because I gather that they will be vitally important if we're to avoid that 30-year time frame that you spoke about.
Thank you. Yes. So like you mentioned before, so we are all volunteers doing that in our spare time. And we are doing the best to raise more awareness that wombats with mange can be treated if caught in time, and also about the plight of the wombats in general with mange. So many people still don't know that wombats with mange are, dying from it. It's not just a rash on the skin. So there's not enough awareness out there at the moment. Some people think it's mud on the wombats and they don't realize they've been sick. So we'd like to raise awareness so more people can report them to us, and the wombats are getting a chance of treatment. So Mange Management is actually providing free treatment kits for landowners who would like to treat a wombat with mange on their property. And we keep them free so more wombats get a chance of being treated. So that's quite important for us.
And are they available Victoria-wide?
We've got about 50 pickup points around the state, so people don't have to go too far to pick up one of the free treatment kits. And we've got a really good report a wombat form on our website, which is also mobile friendly. So people, even if they're on the go and see a wombat somewhere, they can easily report them to us. And we let them know where the next pickup point is, so they can pick up their free treatment kit from there. But we are trying to do much more than that for the benefit of all wombats. We've actually just funded the first phase study with Melbourne University. We had a grant from the Victorian government called Pick My Project.
Yep.
And we have funded the first phase study into the current treatment, which is called Cydectin. The ultimate goal is actually to provide solid scientific data about effective dosing and potential side effects, and we're really excited about that. It's something really close to our hearts. We're planning to do more work with researchers because a lot of things are not known about mange in wombats, and we would like to understand it better and what can be done in the fight against mange.
Well, that sounds absolutely marvellous, because, so many things that have come into this country are here really in one way or another as a result of a couple of hundred years, as you say, of white colonisation, and they didn't exist in this country beforehand. But the only real way that we've got of combating them now is through research, through data collection as well, and putting those two together to make sure that we're coming up with very real and practical solutions for the issues that are facing all animals, wombats included. And so, look, I'm just wondering in that respect then, have you got a recent success story apart from that with a particular animal that you'd like to share? I mean, have you had any that have been very close to your heart? That have all these animals are very close to everyone's heart, but there's impacts upon your life, isn't there?
They're very precious animals, and if you ever have been lucky enough to meet a baby wombat, you know what I'm talking about. They're just absolutely gorgeous. But we had actually just recently one of our furry friends called Owen in Kangaroo Ground. He was treated by a local volunteer called Linda, and she's been so dedicated and over time even gained his trust. So he would let her come fairly close, and then she could treat with the pole and scoop for a lot longer than you usually can. If you want to check that out, we've got before and after photos on our Facebook page under Mange Management, and you can see the amazing improvement in Owen and what can be done.
Fantastic. Can I just ask you to repeat the address of that page just for everyone listening so they've got a chance to write it down and to go and visit?
So on Facebook, it's called Mange Management, Treating Mange in Wombats, and our website is www.mangemanagement.org.au.
Fantastic. And look, recently there has been some positive changes for wombats, and one of those was that through asking the right question in Parliament, I was able to get the minister to overturn a somewhat outdated and archaic rule in Victoria that was a hangover from the old parish system, as a matter of fact, before we had shire councils, that allowed landowners to arbitrarily kill wombats without having to get an authority to cull wildlife or any of the other restrictions that are on all sorts of other wildlife. And it resulted in several circumstances of whole family units being wiped out just because a particular landowner felt that there was some sort of obstruction to his farming practices, or that they were destroying fences or doing all sorts of other things. And they didn't even have to go through the process of proving that was the case. And so that was quite a decent win, I felt, from our perspective, because it then placed wombats firmly under the other types of protections that other wildlife have. But to my mind, there's still a lot more that needs to be done to protect them. But I'd like to hear from you, what you think the next steps are to further protect them in Victoria.
Yeah, so thanks to you and your assistance there. Much needed changes have been incorporated now, and they were long overdue, like you said. So I'm sure the wombats and the public appreciate that very much. We do, for sure. I think the situation is still a little bit unclear to many people as to when do they need a permit, what can be done, what can't be done. And we still think that too many authority to control wildlife permits are given out by the state government. It's really sad if you look at the numbers over the last few years, where mainly healthy wombats have been culled, which of course reduces the number even further. And I think one of the issues that they're still being given out in that number is that no population survey has ever been done in Victoria. So nobody really knows how many wombats do we have, how many wombats do have mange, what's the percentage. And of course, a population survey like that would need to be done at least once or twice a year for a number of years before any trends could be observed. So that's something we would like to see being initiated by the state government. And again, that's been long overdue, because we fear that wombats could be already a lot more threatened in some areas than we think.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm always of the mind as well that these types of surveys should be undertaken by the likes of the different universities that, it's in their interest. I mean, this is their field of expertise, of data collection, as I said before, and scientifically analysing that data and seeing the trends and seeing where things can go. And then you've got empirical evidence that more help is needed. I'm very much in favour of that.
Because nobody at the moment can say how bad the situation really is, because there's just no reliable data at hand at the moment. So to convince the government and other authorities that something needs to be done, I think that's the first step.
And Katja, wombats they're such incredible creatures, and really at the end of the day they're just trying to do what wombats do and live their lives. However, sadly, they're often seen by the farming community as pests, just in the same way that they often see macropods, kangaroos, as pests. It seems to be a trend that our native wildlife, which has been here for millions of years and evolved perfectly for their environment, that they're seen in this way, and that they're seen as something destructive and in the way of that commodification of our landscape for agricultural purposes. Now, wombats can't adapt to the way that humans live their lives, and the changes that we make to their environment with fencing and turning land into farms, so that we humans really, I think, need to adapt to enable wombats to be safe and protected. What can people do in their own lives to help make the world safer for wombats?
Oh, look, we need wombats in this world, and not only because they're an iconic Australian animal. They are also what many people don't realize, what you would call an eco-engineer, and they're incredibly important for our environment. So digging mammals like wombats, they improve the soil turnover as they're able to dig through hard soils like hellcrete. So, and they also help with the water infiltration, which increases the soil moisture. And on top of that, they also spread a certain type of fungi, which in turn helps plants to increase the absorption of nutrients and also deal with our nutrient-poor Australian soils. So they are much more important for the environment than a lot of people realize. A lot is kind of obviously going on behind the scenes, and if you don't know, so that's another thing. I think we need to raise the profile of wombats and how important they are. I think people can help wombats in various ways. Report wombats with mange to us, of course, and assist with treating them. That's very important. Also spreading the words that mange can be treated. And another important thing is slow down on the roads at night to avoid hitting wombats or any other wildlife, really.
Yep.
Another thing they can do is volunteering for and donating to organizations like ours. That's really crucial to keep them going, as we, for example, rely solely on donations and grants to keep our treatment kits free, and therefore give more wombats a chance of being treated. There's also, because you mentioned farmers before, there's solutions for farmers by using wombat gates, for example, and they do work quite well. And I have to say, we lately have been getting quite a few calls from farmers who would like to help their wombats. They care about their land and all its inhabitants, including the wildlife. So that is really encouraging to us.
Fantastic. That is really good to hear. And I love that term that you used before, eco-engineers, because it does really sum up, what they actually do. And look, right throughout the course of all these interviews that I've been doing with all these wonderful people, yourself included, that are working with our native wildlife, is that a common theme is emerging. And that is that our wildlife aren't just there because they're something that's pretty or has evolved over a period of time to merge in with their environment so that they're protected from predators and all those sorts of things. Those things have happened. But they're there for a reason. Our ecosystem exists in the way that it does because of the biodiversity that we have, and that every single animal has a role to play in how that structure works and is maintained. And if you, through human interference, remove any aspect of that ecosystem, that biodiversity, then you run the very real risk of having even not just perhaps a localized collapse of that ecosystem, that structure, but even a far broader effect where some of those ecosystems can collapse entirely.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, definitely.
Okay, cheers. And look, so thanks so much for being with us today and explaining all that about wombats and everything else. And if you could leave our listeners with one thought today, what would it be?
Or I'd say let's all work together to make the world a better place for wombats.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Katja. Thanks again so much for being with us. And you're doing great work, and please keep it up. And I look forward to seeing the results of this work that you're doing coming to fruition with the university.
Thanks so much for having me and for all your support, Andy. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.